Well, the ANC's 55th National Conference has wrapped up, of course, the first part of the conference, as more will be concluded on the 5th of January 2023, as we've just heard. Just going back to President Cyril Ramaphosa's closing remarks, he was very firm and reiterating that the conference was a watershed and that discussions were robust by the members. He also says that the party's unity was tested during the conference, but that they came out victorious and came out as a united party, obviously saying that in his second term, his role as president is going to be to unite the party, especially as it carries forward its renewal vision. He also talked about the conference reaffirming its vision as a party, and that is to serve the people of South Africa. Talked a lot about corruption, saying that within the ANC it is still a threat to the organization and its existence. He obviously says that much needs to be done or much has rather been done to eradicate state capture, and that all necessary steps will be taken to address this problem, even if it is painful and could cause discord within the party structure. Just to remind you again, in terms of what Fikile Mbalula, the newly appointed Secretary General, said earlier, confirming, of course, that the Conference Steering Committee has ruled that the National Conference be adjourned today, even though voting still continues for NEC members. Now, the conference will, of course, be adjourned to the 5th of January 2023 and will be convened in a hybrid platform. Of course, delegates can join at their various provinces in one venue per province. At around about 3:30 this afternoon, up to 3,000 delegates, we heard, had already voted. And once voting then is concluded, the ANC will announce the NEC today. As you can see, NEC top, the ANC's top 7 there, taking photos, a photo op for them before the media then will have one-on-one interviews with some of the delegates and also some of the leaders of the party. And those numbers basically saying that over 4,500 delegates were present at the conference, and around 900 media houses were present. The President Cyril Ramaphosa thanking all of those delegates and all of those, journalists and media houses that had converged, to attend the province. Now, already we know that some delegates have already left to their various destinations. Earlier today, those, I'm told, had already voted, of course, for the NEC, but they have already made their way back, and therefore the Commission reports, cannot be adopted, and hence the postponement today. But our journalists are still on the ground at Nasrec as everything wraps up. In fact, let's cross now to my colleague Naledi Molewa, who's been there pretty much for the past 5 days. Naledi, thank you so much for your time. So, the conference wraps up. Of course, we know that there are some, issues that still need to be discussed on the 5th of January 2023. But talk to us about, what are some of those discussions that will then still need to be tabled come next month?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. As you can see, those images that have been rolling on the screen there showing really the end of the 55th National Conference, at least the physical event taking place here at Nasrec, the 55th National Conference of the African National Congress, where we've come out of it with a top 7. NEC yet to be announced, and a lot of the resolutions of even the commissions are yet to be adopted. But let's get some of the highlights over the past 4 days, or 5 days rather, with our political editor, Mr. Mzwadi Lembeje. It's been a busy one.
Wow, I couldn't believe that we've reached this point.
It is incredible.
But here we are,
yeah.
Absolutely
interesting. Highlights for you.
Well, obviously, the fact that you have the top 7 now, and then you have the president re-elected with Paul Mashatile, and of course, the 3 officials in the top 7. So that's quite remarkable. I know some people would think, well, they are all deputies, but there's also a treasurer general for the first time.
Yes.
And then that's quite an achievement. And you heard the president when he he spoke right at the end to say this is a struggle that they need to push. He would want one day to see the representation at the conference as delegates to be 50-50. So that is something obviously that I think everyone will welcome. But of course, they have battled in terms of their systems. It took 2 days for registration of delegates. And I think that's the reason, Naledi, why this conference has adjourned. Remember, it's not concluded.
Yeah.
It has adjourned because time is up now.
Yeah.
So, but I guess from the perhaps rowdiness at the beginning, I think the delegates then composed themselves, and then they remembered that they had come here to do the business that everyone expects of them to do.
I think two key things for me. What does this mean now for what happens in January? Fikile Mbalula, now SG of the party, having announced that the party will reconvene virtually on the 5th of January, because that means that from now up until the 5th of January, you have a party that officially does not have an NEC and still needs to adopt some of its resolutions.
Absolutely. And of course, I think they'll conclude the issue of the NEC. It's just that they will be communicated, I think, throughout the provinces. But the fact that you have the top 7, so the party is able to function. And really, I know the president said it's not necessarily unprecedented, but at a national level, it is unprecedented that the conference adjourns and will only conclude at a later stage. But I guess it's a lesson really of what to do going forward. So when you put your systems in place, and of course the kind of divisions that they are going through, contestation. In fact, I was actually surprised that the area where I thought they were going to fight over the credentials was concluded quite easily, if I may put it that way. So, but then other areas like registration, the new system, the online system that they've introduced, I'm sure going forward they'll try and improve it.
Yeah, I think what you heard from the SG, of course, are talking about what the plans are moving forward, and then handing over to the President of the African National Congress, President Cyril Ramaphosa, to wrap up the event. And the President talked over and over again about unity. I mean, it's almost impossible to count how many times he used the word unity, speaking about as well a delegate who walked up to him and said to him, "President, please unite the party, be the leader that unites the party." Is this the conference that did that?
You know, this is the problem, I think, with the ANC conference, or with the ANC conferences. From what they say, it all makes sense. It all lends so good to the ear. The question, in fact, he emphasized it there, is implementation. He is talking about unity. So will they be able to put measures in place that will ensure that that unity he's speaking about happens? Because it's pointless, Naledi, to get onto the rooftop and say, I want all of us to unite. Do things that will demonstrate practically that we want to unite. You don't necessarily have to agree, but unite, because the purpose, and he put it so well to say the existence of the ANC is nothing else but to serve and serve the people. And how do you serve the people if you are disunited? So clearly, what they need to do, which I think they have been lacking for years, it's implementation. If you want unity, what is it that you are doing to ensure that unity?
Well, what does that implementation look like? I mean, you saw as well as the president started his speech, obviously going through protocol, acknowledging all the leaders in the room, acknowledging former President Kgalema Motlanthe, former President Thabo Mbeki, acknowledging former President Jacob Zuma, even though he has already left. The former President Jacob Zuma did not stay until the very end of the 55th National Conference.
Yes, and I think he was a delegate as well. So
of course,
he
yes.
did not come as an ex-official
as a leader.
member. Yeah, of course, you wouldn't know the reasons, because today actually was the last day of the conference. Perhaps we may not put it that way, because he was here until the last day of the conference. So you may find that he may have had other engagements. But basically, the point is, how do you reach out to those who may have been defeated? So that is part of the steps that we are speaking about. You, the ones who have been victorious, so how do you then process that? How do you make sure that even someone who had voted against you or who had not voted for you feels they are welcome. That is the key for them.
Yeah, you've got the president, and I quote here, there have been moments in this conference that have tested our unity and cohesion. And I think we've seen some of those moments going back to the very first day. I mean, the first evening when the president was set to deliver his political report, immediately the tension was there.
In fact, I think he also was referring to the suspension of the Secretary General. Absolutely unprecedented. You had a conference which did not have a Secretary General because he was suspended. Those were the tough moments that they went through. You actually had, it may not necessarily be related to the actual ANC politics, but you had a party which saw its former president being jailed. That is why all of us will speak about July riot. So all of those things impact on how the ANC is viewed, because other people will blame the president directly. So all those things, those are the challenges that he was referring to. But of course, they are now given the new mandate. How do they navigate through? How do they bring on board everyone who may not have agreed with them? Yeah,
we did hear the SG of the party, Fikile Mbalula, and we need to say this over and over again so that people get used to the new positions that are part of that top 7 in the party. The Secretary General of the party also mentioning that there will be a press briefing as well, just to highlight for the media, give them really a way forward. We know that there have been the reports coming out of the commissions that have been held. Fikile Mbalula essentially saying those reports will be shared with the public and the media, even though they will only be adopted in January. So we certainly will take you to that press briefing as soon as it starts. But an important thing that the president said in his final speech: the branches have spoken, speaking once again about branch delegates and congratulating them, if anything, using very kind words and saying, congratulations, you have been diligent in carrying the mandate of your branches to this conference. I think very warm words from the president. Is there a tongue-in-cheek there for those that didn't follow through on those mandates?
Well, this is the conference of branches, Naledi. So when all is said and done, this is their conference. So whatever decision they make here is final. That is why they would say NEC is the highest decision-making body in between conference. So this is the highest. So the branch, the ordinary man and woman in the street, is the one who takes those decisions. That is why it is important that those policy discussions, those resolutions are implemented, because they represent the lowest of the lowest.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of the post-conference, right? Are there going to be delegates that go back and find some contentious discussions waiting for them in the branches? But it has been wonderful covering this 55th National Conference for you. From myself, from Mzwandile, let's catch up with some of our other reporters that have been on the ground, from myself and Mzwandile Beje. Let's see who else has enjoyed this conference as they give us their highlights. Mr. Samkele Maseko has had a very busy 5 days as well.
Yes, and lady, it's been a very tiring past 5 days, not only for myself but also for my other colleagues, Natasha Piri, Kene Mapanga, the technical team, the producers, our researchers led by Renesh as well. They've had a very difficult past 5 days. The ANC having difficulties in the first 2 days with registration, policy issues not coming out thoroughly by those rapporteurs and those who were within those commissions. The report backs not done as yet. The conference adjourned to the 5th of January. We're yet to hear what they decided on in the ETC subcommittee on matters relating to the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, land expropriation without compensation, issues pertaining to the basic income grant, which are some of the basic issues when it comes to policies that the ANC had deliberated upon in the policy conference in June, July earlier on this year. This conference adjourned to technical glitches when it comes to the registration of delegates, and also Dr. Zolini Mkhize losing out to ANC President now, Cyril Ramaphosa, who was re-elected. But of course, I'm not alone. I'm with my colleague Renesh. Renesh, just that closing address by the ANC President, what are some of the key matters that came out for you?
Thanks, Amkela. Obviously, we did not expect any surprises from the re-elected, the newly fresh-minted, newly re-elected President Cyril Ramaphosa. Unfortunately, no speech was given to the media, so we had to take down notes wherever we are sitting. He was very resolute, very direct, very firm, spoke a lot about unity. There was a lot of resistance since 2017, 5 years ago, when they were first elected. He spoke about the branches. The branches have spoken, and once the branches of the ANC have spoken, those decisions, including the leadership elections, have to be respected. So he was very forthright the way he presented whatever discussions were forged during these 5 days. Obviously, we know that the commissions, there were no report backs, as you correctly mentioned. There were no media briefings as promised yesterday by the new SG Fikile Mbalula. So obviously lots to look forward to in the new year 2023. On the 5th of Jan, conference is going to reconvene. It's going to be a hybrid session with connections throughout the province, across the country, and then obviously the big one is going to be the NEC meeting on the 6th of Jan, and that will precede the big one. That's going to be the Jan 8 statement, and I think that's going to be a homecoming of sorts for the new Secretary General Fikile Mbalula, because he hails from the Free State, and the ANC will be celebrating their 111th anniversary in the Free State in Botshabelo, I believe.
Yes, indeed. It will be Botshabelo, where Fikile Mbalula hails from around that particular area in the southern parts of the Free State province. But also, when you speak about matters pertaining to respecting the decisions of branches, ANC President at pains explaining that branch leaders and also provincial leaders must stick to the mandates given by their branches when they come to conference. One may say that that is a swipe at Stanley Muchupu Matabata, Florence Radzelani, the Deputy Chair of Limpopo, and also Bioscope Makamo, the Deputy Provincial Secretary, in a sense that they ditched the branch mandate of electing the ANC President when they came to conference. That's taking a jab at the provincial leadership there. But looking at that, the policy issues were not reported upon to conference plenary because of time deficits that were there at conference. What can South Africans take from this conference from a policy sensitive perspective, from those who are looking at investing into the country?
Mkelo, there's always this media narrative that every national conference, every 5 years, is mainly about leadership elections. And I think what happened here for the past 5 days just fits into that narrative. The fact that the conference did not complete the work that it was actually set out to do, because national conference is not only about leadership elections. It's also about policies. It's about the policies that were discussed at the July policy conference, months before the national conference. And when we get to national conference, it's basically about rubber stamping those policies. And the fact that conference did not finalize that work, did not rubber stamp those policies, it's carried over into the new year. So it actually feeds into that narrative that the media always talks about and vaunts about. But going back to what national conference is about, I think what the president wanted to do is just to re-emphasize that national conference is about the branches. Delegates at the national conference comprise 90% of everybody who appears here. It's not only about voting for the president and obviously now the top 7. So I think the president wanted to re-emphasize that. So he wanted to emphasize as well, don't take away the power from the branches. Whether you're a provincial executive committee, whether you're a regional executive committee, it's not about you. It's not about the PEC, it's not about the REC, it's not even about the NEC, the National Executive Committee, but it's about ordinary branch members that comprise this 110-year-old party, a party that has been around from 1912, Africa's biggest and oldest liberation movement come political party. So again, I think I applaud the president that the focus must be on those ordinary branch members.
Well, Ranesh, it's not only indeed about the election of leadership, but in all fairness and honesty to them, they've got a policy conference which is in June, which precedes the national conference of the ANC, where policy decisions are ultimately taken at that policy conference, and the national conference just basically rubber stamps and adopts those policy proposals from the policy conference or rejects them. One of the many issues to look out at on the 5th of January, when the virtual conference of the ANC reconvenes on the 5th of January, is those policy issues, the basic income grant, nationalization creation of the South African Reserve Bank, land expropriation without compensation, the implementation of the National Health Insurance as well, and also the roadmap that they are going to take to 2024 and the policy framework that they are going to have for coalition governments, where South Africa could see coalition governments in Gauteng, in KwaZulu-Natal, and also at a national level, with the ANC in 2021 dropping below 50%. Kenny, as we link to you as well, as we were covering this conference with our many colleagues that are also connected with us. Over to you, Kenny.
Thank you to my colleague Samkele Masego. Indeed, when we approach the ANC's 55th conference, we approached it beyond the election that's going to take place. In an unusual turn of events, it's adjourned without us getting to the substantive business of the day. Of course, in the last 5 years, it has been a difficult time for the ANC. So this was an opportune time for us to get those policies emanating from that conference that were going to be accepted or adopted here at this conference and explain to South Africans how it was going to affect them. However, at this stage, we're going to have to wait for January to understand how the ANC is going to solve some of the systemic social and economic challenges that we're facing in this country. I'm joined by an international editor for the SABC News, Ms. Sophie Mokoena, who's going to elaborate further on this. Thank you so much for joining us. In an unusual turn of events, they've closed or adjourned this conference rather to January without us having an understanding of how they're going to approach some of the, at least the immediate problems that we have. What do you make of that, Ms. Mokoena?
Well, it was clear when I spoke to Nomvula Mokonyane on Saturday night, Friday night, and also on Sunday that there are delays and therefore they are not going to be able to conclude the business of conference. And therefore it did happen, as you can see. I just hope that they will find a way to capture the lost ground, because as you can see, it is going to be a difficult one. And as we speak, if the camera can just, if possible, turn there, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma speaking to Fikile Mbalula there, you can see that there's a lot that the ANC has to do. You know that there was a tension, particularly towards this conference, and it was clear that there was going to be these delays, and the issues that crippled the build up to the conference did play itself here, and therefore these delays are not something that was not expected. What is critical is to ensure that the president of the ANC, now in charge and firmly in charge, he does ensure that on the 5th of January next year, he is able to ensure that again they do convene the conference and finalize the outstanding matters. But it is going to be a difficult one. Particularly, it is the first time where you have a conference and we are leaving the precinct where the conference was held, not knowing who are the members of the National Executive Committee. These are men and women who are supposed to lead the ANC for the next 5 years. And I think it is a very difficult time for the ANC. And but this time around, President of the ANC has got support from his Secretary General. He does have a support from the chairperson, the Deputy Secretary, the second Deputy Secretary, and with the first Deputy Secretary, I know her in politics. When the matters have been concluded, she tends to rally behind the leader. She is going to do just that. You also have Paul Mashatile, and that walkabout earlier on, the president and the deputy president, it is the first time. Normally, it is just the president who's doing that, and therefore you could see that the president of the ANC was really ensuring that there's no gap like it has been previously.
To interject, Ms. Mokoena, does this inspire confidence for South Africans that they had all hopes for load shedding, issues such as crime, poverty, etc., that they would have an understanding of how the ANC is going to take it forward?
Between now and the 5th of January, it is going to be a problem for South Africans to be convinced that the ANC is ready, and it has kind of corrected itself. But the 5th of January will be a determining date, but also January 8, they can still undo the damage.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mokoena. So we'll wait for January to find out when the ANC will be adopting some of those policy proposals that they have discussed during this conference, as well as a policy conference that preceded before it. I'm going to toss over to my colleague Pamani Baloy.
Thank you so much, Kenny. Indeed, it has been a long 5 days here at Nasrec, bringing conversations that were being had in this precinct by ANC leaders who had met for this past 5 days to map a way forward for the party to carry this counter forward. But as conversations were being had here in Nasrec, other conversations were being had by you, our viewer, on social media to talk about, hashtag ANC55, hashtag SABC News, and so many other hashtags that were happening. Right now, I'm joined by my colleague, Thembiso Sithole, who's been monitoring this social media conversation. Thembiso, it's been quite interesting on social media. What are some of the sentiments that you take out of this conference?
Well, we all know that the president delivered his final address today. Some matters that are outstanding will be attended to next year in January. We know the voting of the additional members is still continuing at this point. The sentiment on social media is that there are those who are saying, finally, it's over. We've seen a lot of this about the conference. We can get back to our life. But in between, there has been, in terms of that's the sentiment on social media, others are saying we look forward to what these leaders will be doing for us. And then you also had an interesting interview, right, about with Esther Matabate, talking about his role and the changes that he tried to make within the ANC. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think he has an answer that he needs to account for?
Oh, Thembiso, it's been very interesting monitoring the developments that have been happening in Limpopo, where we've seen a lot of social media videos that affect leaders in Limpopo. We've seen Ama Bouves, which is now essentially trending. We've seen our premier being what is called being blue-ticked. And this morning when we spoke to him,